My name is Raju. I have been here, I don't know since when. When I was in grad school in 1993 or 4, I came to York and I said, I really want to be at York. But anyway, so I have been here since 2004. I teach here in this faculty, which specializes in everything environmental, everything urban. Well, it's basically the entire society in a good way. So I'll chair the meeting here. But I won't be speaking, I'll just go back to one of those three themes. So thank you all for coming. This event has been organized by what I lovingly call the Marx Center at York. It's called Marxist Studies from Asian and International Perspectives, which is organizing the conference, and many of you are involved. I don't need to say more. Socialist Project and Socialist Register, and Professor Greg Albo is the pivot for both these projects. I will say a little bit more about him in a minute. April 25th, Cultural Association based in Toronto, and so all these groups have been involved in organizing this event. I'm very thankful to all of them. We have assembled here, of course, to talk about labor and the left movement, and I will say a few words about that. But first, the introduction to our speakers. With us today is Dr. Raquel Varela from Lisbon. Raquel is a social historian specializing in global history of labor, revolution, and in education and work, and many, many other things. She's a public intellectual in the true sense. She shares her ideas with the public in a way that the public understands. She's a regular participant on television and radio programs. I think she goes to one of the television studios on every Friday, I think she said, in Portugal. Yesterday she was interviewed by Omni TV in downtown Toronto, and perhaps you will see some of that. She was interviewed, of course, today by Aishwarya on behalf of the Left blog for publication of some of her ideas. There is something called Left blog. It's a part of the Marx Center, and please write for the blog. Just contact Aishwarya if you have an idea for the blog. Traveling with Raquel. Okay, here I thought I missed him. Traveling with Raquel is her husband Roberto Della Santa, who is a sociologist. Because time is limited and they are here for just for a few days, we use Raquel's labor time and we leave Roberto with a lot of leisure time. So, but this time, not always. Raquel will speak for about 30 minutes. She could speak longer, but about 30 minutes initially. After her, Professor Greg Albo will make some comments. Greg teaches in Political Science Department. This is, interestingly and happily, one of the occasions where I can truly say, and anybody can truly say, the speaker does not need any introduction. But I'll say one thing though, which I have already said. He's the force of nature behind several things, left-leaning and leftist, happening in Toronto in Canada, including especially the Socialist Project and the Socialist Register, the annual journal. Truly a pride of York. I love you, Greg, all the time. Oh gosh.
That's because I answer his emails at 4 o'clock in the morning. There's only other correspondent.
Before I request Raquel to begin, let me just spend maybe no more than 2 minutes to set the intellectual context. You know, labor is often seen as a group of men and women, and sometimes even children, who suffer. But this is a very limited view of what labor is. Suffering, material suffering, emotional suffering, etc., caused by the exploitation and subjugation by the employers is not the only attribute of labor. We forget that. When we think about labor, we think about low wages, suffering, illness, etc. But no, labor is not just a suffering class, it is also a fighting class. This fight of labor is of three forms. 1, 2, and 3. I hate everything to do with Stalin, but I like some discipline, numbering. 1. Labor fights for improvements in its social ecological conditions, material, subjective, from employers and the state, which itself is a terrain, meaning the state itself is a terrain and target of struggle. Labor also fights and should fight to eliminate the conditions which require the fight for improvements. First, fight for improvements, then the condition for the fight for improvements. We beg for little things from the employer all the time. When will the time come when we will not have to beg for little things? So that is, labor fights to eliminate the necessary conditions for its suffering. And these conditions are, above all, a profit-driven economy and the state that basically protects it. So that's the second form of fighting. One is for improvement, and the second is for elimination of the condition for suffering. But the third thing is, labor fights to create and must fight to create and defend the conditions which would allow it to engage in the first two forms of the fight. That is, labor must fight for the democratic rights, including the rights of the oppressed sections of labor, women, racialized and religious minorities, just democratic rights. All these three forms of fight must be of importance to the left. All these three forms of fight for economic, etc. improvement, fight to eliminate the source of suffering, and the fight for democratic rights, without which we cannot engage in all these fights. This is the context in which Dr. Varela's work and her lecture today assume tremendous importance. Please welcome Dr. Varela, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Raju, and to all organizers, to friends and comrades here. I am sorry I will speak in broken English, and well, I will try to do my best in these 30 minutes to address such a complex subject. I am perfectly aware of the limitations of what I'm going to share with you, but I think, well, above all, I would like to provoke a discussion around this. I have been always a militant in the revolutionary left, in the Trotskyist movement, and I was really surprised when I was in my former organization, which I left formally in 2005, that how far away they were from the organized working classes. And I have decided that I want to do my militancy in the working classes, and that my academic work should be attached to the working classes, either manual or intellectual work. There is no such thing as manual intellectual work, but let's put it like that to make it easier. And when I start engaged as an academic and a militant with unions, I came to conclude that of my worst ideas on the role of the left and the working classes were even worse than I thought. There is a deeply disconnection between what's going on in the academy and what I could see in the workplaces, either factories or hospitals or schools or whatever. And I will share with you, I'm not defending any kind of anti-intellectualism, which is so strong nowadays among the extreme left and also among the postmodern. What I wanted to share with you is this: one of the problems I think we are facing today is the lack of connection between theory and organization. They seem that they don't speak with each other. First problem I realized after we have done in our Observatory of Labor and Living Conditions 14 studies with the unions about working conditions. We have made more than 50,000 inquiries to 14 different areas of workers, cabin crew, dock workers, teachers, nurses, and many others, was that the lack of centrality of labor in our theoretical approach. Labor not just as a way of living, labor not just as a kind of a mythification, but labor as an essential part that defines human beings. And I think the ontological notion of what is labor that can be summarized, and it was summarized by John Bellamy Foster in this debate, this controversy between Edward Bellamy, that defined socialism in the 19th century as a place in Chicago where we would work a lot until 40 or 45, and then we leave work and we dedicate ourselves just to leisure. And William Morris, which by the way was first published in Portugal under Beto's editor, he had it with a typographer from Açores community, the island that is the majority of the Portuguese community here in Toronto comes from there. We have just published 2 years ago the News from Nowhere for the first time in Portuguese from Portugal. Well, William Morris has answered to Edward Bellamy, saying that, writing also a novel, News from Nowhere, saying that labor, socialism is not leisure, is not giving up of work, is fighting for making all work meaning, all work intellectual, the reconnection between manual and intellectual work, and bringing the sense of work again to people as a mean of creativity, as development of language, as development of feelings of social relations, of recognition, concept that comes from psychoanalysis, which I think is fundamental. This, the labor as a matter of survival, which shall be regulated by the state, is not a revolutionary proposal. Is the unions and the social democratic proposal during the social pact after the Second World War, which has led consequently to the majority of the left became highly defender of social assistance instead of employment with rights and meaning. Now the majority, even of the social democratic parties, have abandoned the full employment policy, the reduction of working time hours to everybody be able to work, reduction of night shifts, and elimination of dangerous works, etc., and culture for everyone. Instead of this, they are defending unemployment subsidized and, in the limit, universal income. And this has abandoned a huge part of the working classes in the hands of extreme right, in my opinion. We can develop this in the debate. The second thing is that has abandoned a huge part of the working classes, also the middle classes. I will refer here to middle classes as petit entrepreneurs, but this is, we could debate this concept. It's the fiscal policies. Majority of the left has embraced a program where they in fact defend the expropriation of the middle class working sector towards social assistance. So the social assistance now is paid in this policy, which is a policy, of course, designed in the World Bank research. If you go there, you will find hundreds of theses about this, and all the ministers of the neoliberal period went to the World Bank saying we need to control, with the precarization of work and privatization, we need to control labor revolts, and we do this by social assistance, which, by the way, is an Hayek proposal. Hayek, I don't know if I'm pronouncing correctly in English. Well, this has led to the fact that while there was this, in some countries, let's not be Eurocentric, after the Second World War, there was this progressive taxation, which led, in fact, some redistribution of rent. What we see after the 70s is that the redistribution is among working classes. Is a little better paid sectors of the working class are paying for the social assistance, for the subsidized to companies with the excuse that they are creating employment, etc., etc., etc. The third problem I can see, which is, in my opinion, a huge problem to rebuild this connection between theory and well, let's say leaderships and the working classes, well, between theory and organization, among, to be more precise, is the question of what I will call necessity and everyday life. When I have studied revolutionary process, and I have studied specifically the dual power, how dual power is developed in revolutionary process, that's what I'm interested in, and I hope in the next 10 years don't have to write hundreds of articles that nobody reads in blind reviews that, well, you know, and hope to dedicate to this, which is the dual power born not from socialist ideas, but from necessities of the working class that the states cannot fill. And this was so in any revolutions, either in the Soviets, taking care of energy distribution, garbage distribution, or in the Portuguese Revolution, education, healthcare. The dual power was born from empty space. And after the Second World War, with the welfare state, which is a counter-revolutionary movement that results from the defeat of Nazi fascism and the mediation and negotiation between Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin in Yalta and Potsdam, it seems that the horizon of the left is toward the state. And the state, in fact, during the welfare state or the social pact period, has fulfilled some of the needs of the working class, like healthcare, education, pensions, which are now collapsing in front of all the working classes. And I think we have not just to fight for a different, I think the fighting for, let me put it like this, if I can do it. The fight for socialism has to be together with the developing of the needs of the workers through unions and political organizations. We should defend that the unions and the political parties on the left provide a quality education to workers, because we make a huge confusion between public and state. What is the state is not necessarily public. The working classes are dealing with the tremendous degradation of the education of their daughters and sons, and this is highly organized by a postmodern theory that comes, of course, from Althusser and well, Bourdieu as well, Foucault theories, that says that the school is a terrible place where the bourgeoisie dominates the working classes, when for the working classes, of course, the school is the access to knowledge for their kids, and the only possibility they have to give knowledge to their kids, and maybe some kind of social mobility. So you need to be really wealthy, postmodern, to say the school is a terrible place where authoritarianism is exercised. And I think this, I gave the example of school, but I could give other examples where, for example, when I was in Greece during the general strike, we have visited 2 clinics of physicians, left physicians, that were providing healthcare free to migrant workers. And this was essential to organize the migrant workers against the extreme right. What I'm saying is that we are not just, when we make the serious critique that the unions have become service centers, we have to make the differentiation between what is to play with pensions in a pension fund and give healthcare. It's not the same. We need to cope with the necessities of the working class if we want to debate theory, politics, and strategy. They must be together. I love this example. The first party of Karl Marx, they had meetings once or twice, it was the Fair League, once or twice a week. They had dance once a week, theater once a week, music. All this was organized by the party itself. So the party was not this boring place where you go after a terrible day of working to listen to the most incredible strategic opinion. I don't want to look at the intellectual. The party was the place where you go to debate strategy for the working class, but you also go to dance. And this is not a secondary problem, because capitalism has destroyed love relations, as we talk today, has destroyed love in a broader sense, has destroyed friendship, has destroyed. We need to reconnect people in a way where we should defend places where people meet each other again, where people can relate each other again, instead of this situation where all the workplaces, especially with new management from the 80s onward, have become places where people hate the colleague because everything is done for you to hate the colleague, including, of course, the management system that was invented here in the railways in the late 19th century, and then was it was amplified during the 20s in the automobile industry, and finally today is in hospitals, is in education, is everywhere. In everywhere there is a management system with, which we have studied in the last years together with the French group of psychoanalysis leading by Christophe Dejour in France, and they have developed this notion of the real of work and psychodynamics of labor, which is how to build cooperation in the workplaces against the new management tools that, of course, say that you just can develop your career if you are against your colleague. I will not develop this, but it is individual evaluation of labor, metric system, total quality. There are several methods that lead the workers to hate each other. I have to add to this, if I have time. I don't know how I put it this, but I want to put it in this debate. I was never a Foucaultian, and I'm always becoming one. I'm almost becoming one, with these postmodern ideas that everybody should, that every problems in the workplace have to be solved with a denounce, with persecution, with surveillance, with the law, either moral harassment, sexual harassment, a problem among workers. Everything seems to be solved in this new left approach, calling the police. So we need hundreds of laws against sexual harassment. We need hundreds of potential denouncers. We need to mistrust. That's the main idea now of this management. The European Union has just approved last year that all public services in the European Union should have an anonymous denounce box. I come from a country where there were 48 years of dictatorship, and anonymous denounce was considered the most awful thing you can do to anyone. And now the European Union has obliged all public service to have an anonymous denounce system. As you can imagine, this anonymous denounce system is used against, it's not using to protect women, is used against people that are organizing or fighting or disobedient, etc., etc. Because it's an anonymous system, and the director does whatever he wants with this system. So there is this, recently also in the European Union, several countries adopt the idea that if you beat the teacher or the doctor, this is a public crime. Everybody can go to the police and say you are a criminal, which is absolutely amazing that the left generally applauds this and says this is wonderful. Now we have a public crime. instead of asking why people are beating their teacher and their doctor, what is happening in the world, why people don't have decent public service, why they are 20 hours in an emergency hospital, why the school is absolutely towards the labor market without teaching, we make a kind of a generalized surveillance system over the people. And I must say that unfortunately, most of the left has been defending all this. I also wanted to underline that as part of neoliberal process, we have a generalization of subcontracting system, but the subcontracting system has made many workers legally employees. They appear as bosses, but they are not bosses. We have a real middle class in some countries, a real middle sector, let's call it like that, a real petit bourgeois, I would say. This is better notion. But we have a huge amount of small business people that are not business. And there are no tools on the left towards these sectors. But there are some good examples. For example, in 2016 or 17, we have it in our last book, I don't know the date now, there was a strike in the cleaning sector of Madrid, the capital of Spain. And the municipality has subcontracted the cleaning sector for 30 or 40 companies. And they started a strike, and Madrid was full of garbage for collapsing. So there was the mayor of Madrid, the president, everybody was, and because the municipality of Madrid said, oh, we have nothing to do with this. This is the problem between workers and the companies. And the workers have answered, no, it's the problem of Madrid. We don't care of the negotiation you have done with the companies. We work for the municipality. We don't work for this subcontracting system. This is, I will use their words, a bullshit you invented. This is not the reality. The reality is that the municipality is our boss, and they have continued the strike and they won. The municipality was obliged to raise the wages to all subcontracting. And when we go back to anarcho-syndicalism in the 19th century, fighting against the subcontracting system was a key organization of the labor movement in the late 19th century. The workers didn't accept the legal framework. They just, and when we go, for example, to the automobile industry, we see, and this is something that one of the enormous mistakes of the unions, the left unions have done, was to accept this separated, which is extremely unfair for the workers. Because, for example, in the Volkswagen industry we study, there are 60,000 directly employed by Volkswagen in Portugal, and around the company, in the same factory, 50,000 in subcontracting system. And they are doing exactly the same thing for half of the price. And one thing we have to demand is about fairness. I will not develop what is fairness, but fairness is an incredible mobilized concept for the working class, is that we have to clearly point that these people should earn exactly the same because they do exactly the same. It doesn't matter how they are contracted. And of course there are tools which, for example, the dockers have used in Portugal in the strike of 2017. The fixed dock workers organized a strike fund to the precarious dock workers. And it was so nice to see that strike. Was really one of the best strikes I was involved, because they were not even on strike, because they were hired by day. And suddenly they all stopped working, and they were the dock workers responsible for shipping the cars of Volkswagen industry. And the government stopped, all countries stopped. It was the general panic, because the dock workers refused to pull the cars. And they asked them, this is an illegal strike. You didn't even ask for, because in Portugal you need to say you are going on strike 2 weeks before you do it. And they say, no, this is not even a strike. We just didn't went to work today. No. And they say, no, you are on strike. No, we are not even workers. How we are on strike? They were joking with the government and with the Volkswagen why they were doing this, why they could stay on strike for 2 or 3 weeks. Because the fixed dock workers pay the strike fund to the precarious workers. And I think we should bring this also to the question of migration, which is a key debate for today. I will try to defend my idea here in a way that I'm not misinterpreted. What the left has been defending is a liberal approach to migration. It's that migrants are a commodity. So we are, the left, I'm not in favor of free circulation of labor. With, a framework of human rights. Everybody has the right to go wherever they want. Well, first of all, most of migrants don't go wherever they want. They are obliged to go because they don't have a job and the means of life in their country. So the first thing we have to say is that imperialist policies destroy people's life and oblige them to go to the other side of the world, not to do a wonderful PhD and meet new colleagues, but to be totally out of social, family, and political rights. The second is that, of course, we are not going to say, as the extreme right says, that we want to regulate migration, or some of the new left says in Germany, for example, Sarah Wagener party, she's defending regulation migration. And I think this is very dangerous, because we are not the states. We don't defend regulation. We are not issuing passports. We defend a world without walls and without borders. But we also don't defend a world where people are a commodity. What can we do about this? What can we do about this that doesn't break our relation with the working class? I give you I probably don't have much time, but I want to give you a concrete example. When there was the 2008 crisis, a multinational from US called Dura, which is a supplier of automobile industry in Germany, said they would dismiss all workers in Germany and subcontract to other countries, including Portugal. I had some students in a special course I was giving for safety in the workplace that were workers there. That's why I know this so much in detail. It was fascinating to accompany this story. The Communist Party Union was running these Dura workers in Portugal. And the Dura workers in Stuttgart in Germany were run by IG Metall, the Social Democratic Union in Stuttgart. And the workers in Stuttgart start a strike on Saturday and Sunday, saying we are against collective dismissals, we will not work extra time on Saturday and Sunday to accomplish this new model. It was a kind of a new car or something, I don't remember. The company was in panic, was many companies getting from Dura, because they produce parts of the cars, was Chrysler, Mercedes, Audio, other ones. They were in panic, so the workers had a lot of power at the time. And what the Dura has done was to bring 300 workers from Portugal in an aeroplane to come to work on Saturday and Sunday to Stuttgart. And do you know what the union in Germany did? They had a pamphlet, which I have, saying, welcome Portuguese workers, you are very welcome, they are strike breakers. Do you realize this? The Portuguese workers are strike breakers. And they have made a flyer saying, welcome Portuguese workers, please do not destroy our machines. Well, what is, no, not destroy is not a good translation. They wanted to say, please take good care of our machines during Saturday and Sunday. And do you know what has happened? The Dura workers, the rank and file against the union, have sabotaged the machines on Friday. They have this compressed air, they have sabotaged all. And the Portuguese workers, many of them, although they have the minimum wage, which was at the time 600 euros, and they were in terrible situation, many of them refused to and asked to go back to Portugal, because they say, look, We are destroying their strike. We are not here working. Of course, the only situation we can have this is the 1864 answer of the International. First of all, we are not going to solve the migration in capitalism. What we can do is to help develop caste conscious and organization worldwide the working class. What we could do in this situation is to demand the IG Metall and the Communist Party, and the Communist Party Union made also a flyer say, wonderful that Dura is subcontracting to Portugal because it will create jobs. So all this situation is a massive situation where all this is called human rights and free circulation. But what we are doing is putting the workers against each other in a way that we are bringing them to the hands of extreme right. And I think we have to defend here what was defended in the first International. The IG Metall earns 6 times more than the Portuguese workers. If you want to do something, you do a strike fund to the Portuguese workers, and the Portuguese workers do the strike for you for half of the price, let me put it like that. This is the just-in-time production, and I think this is something we are facing now. We just saw this just-in-time production as a problem to the workers, when the level of socialization worldwide is now incredible and amazing because all the workers are dependent on each other. We can stop a full production chain. If we do a strike in a little piece of the world, you can stop the chain. I saw a strike when the dock workers in Denmark did 2 hours of strike for the Portuguese workers, and the Portuguese workers earned the strike immediately because the Danish workers said we are not going to unload containers from precarious work in Portugal. So, and it's so easy for the Danish workers because their wage, I saw the same with Nigeria dock workers. So, to sum up, which I already, I just wanted to say one last thing because I couldn't speak of everything I wanted to say, but I believe in order to have a left program towards the working class, we need to recover the notion of prefiguration that I don't have time to develop, but to sum up, I think fighting for socialism is also to design another society. That's what I started by William Morris and News from Nowhere. We really need to say not just why we are against capitalism, but how we could live in another type of society. How our buildings would be, our transports would be, how our schools would be, how we imagine another society. I think part of our strategy is also part of building a new imagination, a new subjectivity. And this is, I don't think this is naive. This is dialoguing with the workers, not just as a material need, but as a cultural need, as a social relations need. It's really designing a new type of relations. We all know that we cannot pre-see how it will be in socialism, and we'll get lots of surprises. But we shall start debating what kind of society we want to live, not just saying that this is a society where we can't go on and live, which is, of course, obviously. Thank you very much for your attention.
Start? Yes. Okay. So thank you, Raquel, for waking me up with that spirited speech. I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning again last night for no good reason. I also want to thank the Cultural Association here for the 25th of April, the Portuguese Cultural Association for bringing you. I actually began learning of the Portuguese Revolution when I was finishing high school and working in factories around where I lived in the mid and late 70s. And there was a flood of Portuguese workers that had come in the 1970s, and they were kind of in the farm implements factory and the bus factory I worked in for 2 or 3 years. and they were kind of key people, so they were kind of agitated, and they were coming from all different political perspectives, almost tearing each other up at times. But it was a good learning experience of kind of the developments there, and so on and so forth. And you could tell which way people were leaning politically, of how much they became immediately involved in the union and so forth. So it's an important revolution that I don't think many people in Canada still kind of understand its pivotal role in Portugal, but also European politics. I think the problem that you set out in the talk is the crucial one that we're facing, in the north in particular, not so different in the south, but a lot of different aspects. But in the north, the critical issue, the crisis of the left that has been lingering for a long time, which is also a crisis of unions, a crisis of the left parties. And we haven't really found substantive exits from either of them. And that's crucial in both kind of where we are politically, but also crucial in the program. Finding new ways of organizing in a program for the left, the question of transforming our conditions and transforming ourselves in the process. And it is, what you put forward, it is a bit of still locked in most cases, to the kind of political conditions that formed in the post-war period, where workers got locked into defending the most progressive forms of competitiveness they could get at the firm level, or defending different notions of socialism in one class, or the conditions of essentially workers paying for their own welfare state without any kind of substantive redistributional or control politics that were able to shift that. But that is still what we're defending. Certainly it's, almost anything that's left positive in this current election in Canada is about defending those best features of that, and no vision, no prefigurative kind of conceptions beyond that. And that's where we're at. I just want to kind of raise a couple of questions from your talk that kept coming that you didn't get around to answer. So I'm going to poke at those and let other people kind of pick up some of those. One of the things that you mentioned is the logistics sector, which is actually crucial. And you figure when you look at the structure of supply chains, you should have more leverage in kind of being able to pull off strikes. But on the capitalist side, they've built up an incredible amount of redundancies often in those supply chains. So there's kind of this international arbitrage that can go along with it. So the organization around that actually becomes quite complex. And it is remarkable how few kind of international strikes in support of some of those things that have occurred. There are a few that we know about, but there's something that's not occurring to kind of use that power that appears self-evident, or limit the arbitrage that the companies have by the redundancies they've built into supply chains. But it's also, even on a national scale, the organization of the logistics sector and breaking from the contracted outwork and all that stuff is really spinning. In North America, there's been an incredible effort for about a decade now, with very little gains. There's some things, but the difficulty of organizing in the gig economy with all those problems still is there. And to some extent, when the unions have even had some success, you look at what they're declaring as victories, and you start, ripping apart, section by section, clause by clause, what's there. There aren't much in the way of victories that's kind of that are forces that have, pushed against and kind of started a kind of new logic. So I'm kind of wondering if the kind of any sober assessment of what's been occurring in North America draws you to that conclusion. I was just wondering your thoughts on kind of that same problems in Europe. Sometimes you see some solidarity work around some of the strikes in the logistics sector, the gig economy in Europe, but it also appears that there's still a lot of spinning, inability to kind of break through. And your thinking about this is kind of what I'd most be interested in hearing about. A second thing I think that I think is crucial, and it deals with climate change and the response that we're getting. Obviously, the dominant response across the advanced capitalist countries in particular, but it's similar. The role that our kind of Prime Minister Mark Carney played for 5 or 6 years of kind of finding market solutions to climate change, and climate finance issues are everywhere, so that dominates there. But in the workers' movement, you've largely got just focuses on just transition and kind of finding, help us move from one job to another and reskilling. But the critical thing is, is the need to kind of push beyond that, because both in the energy transition and then the transition to the capital stock that has to go on and on. The critical thing is pushing towards the struggle for conversion and conversion of those plants. But the grip on that, which you could say for a period in the 1970s was gaining some ground into dealing with the new weapon systems. But now we've got fucking climate change and these god-awful new weapon systems and the proliferation and the demand by the ruling classes to expand military spending even more, and almost silence on issues of conversion at the plant. So conversion for obviously need and use rather than exchange in the most simplest terms. But that seems to me crucial, and we can't seem to get that on the agenda. And almost, when you had any crack in any left government that's come to power, there's been almost no movement in that direction. But we see, the strike, the long-time struggle over this in northern Italy, and a couple of factories and a couple in Scotland. And, we worked for a couple of years on a plant, an auto plant being shut down in the Toronto area, trying to get it. You could kind of get some grip of the idea, but the movement in that direction is still slipping. And so it seems to me that's one of the most fundamental things to get on a political program at all, is kind of how to kind of get on workers' plans, et cetera, and conversion of the capital stock, not just kind of taking care of making sure everybody remains employed. It seems to me critical. I'd love to hear counter examples you could put forward. A friend, somebody you probably know, of course, Hillary Wainwright, has been working with the Transnet on this kind of question, trying to canvass everywhere. She kind of always circles back to the British Lucas plan almost, and a few other incidents. So it's kind of a really crucial thing, I think. The other thing I think that we're struggling with in a fundamental way in the union sector is in the public sector work, and the ability to kind of to push back against the new forms of public management and all the kind of contracting structures, marketization internal to the public sector, without it just being an attempt to push back in the direction of kind of an older style vertical Weberian type bureaucracy as kind of the response, and preserving jobs in the old system and that. But kind of strategies to break through the public sector and around new forms of organization seem critical. PIPS and a few of the other has been good on some of this stuff, and they're international, but obviously the work they do is particularly in Europe. North America, there's almost nothing going on of a substantive kind. But that question of how to democratize that work seems crucial, considering, even in the lowest case in the advanced capitalist core, 40% of output is passing through the state sector. And the state, so, you've got a huge portion of employment. You have to find some other way that workers' control and democracy means something other than the old style of bureaucracy against the different forms of marketization. And that seems to me crucial also to a left program for the future of labor. Your ideas there, I'm dying to hear too. I keep wanting to get more and more out of her. Another one I raised, which in the article that was circulating of yours that was in Canada and elsewhere over the last few days, on the question of the right and the rise of the far right, and what that looks like in practice in most places. There is nothing of significant kind that's welded into any kind of, anti-fascist movement, anti-right, where it coalesces of any kind. So the gains, of the far right, as we all know, have continued to roll on. And the political mechanisms and the organizational mechanisms just to begin now and say, stop, put a block. We're still scrambling to see what those will look like. And so I think that's another open question. I don't think there's any, even with Trump in power right now, it's scrambling to kind of see what kind of configured, new kind of political form will configure to kind of put an opposition to that. The final thing I just want to raise is also at the political level, and it is a little bit of a question oriented to your interpretation also of the Portuguese case, which we've looked in North America, Canada in particular at times, to developments in Europe as being possible openings, Greece and Syriza and Podemos in Spain, Corbyn in Britain, and on De Linka, etc. We've all kind of waved one of those banners here and there, and they all spun. There was more stability in some ways in the left bloc and the coalition in Portugal, and your own interpretation in terms of a program for the left. I know you might be harsh, but I'd like to hear it anyways. Of kind of the balance sheet of this period in government, particularly with the election coming up, and basically the left looks like it might get completely destroyed. Okay, you can say it. It looked like they just did look in almost desperate situation, all the different components of the left that were in the various coalition, and it's hard to argue that the Portuguese Socialist Party is much of a left as anywhere else what social democracy is. So thank you for the talk. I'm so glad you come to Canada to speak, and where's Louise? Thank you for help coordinating Raquel's visit here, and hope everybody else will contribute to the discussion.
Excellent, thank you both. Okay, yes, that's it. We have a choice. You could actually respond to Greg now, or, because Greg has raised some very interesting questions, but there's no reason why the responsibility is only on you. People can actually respond. So let's open up the discussion
Let me start by the logistics sector. It's very easy. It's not very easy, but it's more easy to pick up the example of the logistics sector, these choke points, and the dock workers, because dock workers is our, it's a good example. We have a lot of good examples among the dock workers. We also have lots of awful examples among the dock workers. So the two things happen. But if you think about, for example, it's true what you say, Greg, on redundancies and all of that. But for example, if you pick up the amount of work now that is dependent on this logistics sector through this incredible spread system, I saw already in Brazil and in Portugal Uber strikes. And this is not a strike, officially. In fact, I think the governments are facing a huge contradiction, because regulating is also being allowed to forbidden. And when we saw the Uber strike in Lisbon, they could not do anything. The Uber strike was that the guys didn't went to work on that day. They don't have work. Why? So if this is spread to Amazon or other sectors, it's because it's highly contradictory, because people need unions to protect them. But at the same time, if it is outside of the legal framework, it becomes much more dangerous, potentially much more dangerous. Of course, it can be within the legal framework, and they disrespect the legal. We have lots of examples about this. We have the Metroviarios in Argentina, which is run by a radical Trotskyist organization. It's the metro autodelegados, the name in Buenos Aires. And now they are legal. For many years they were not legal, and they were the metro drivers of Argentina. And they just went on strike, and the government wanted to speak with them, and they said, no, we don't. Oh, but you are not a legal union. And they say, you don't even speak with us. We don't, I mean, we have our union. Oh, but your union is not a union, and they don't care. They just stopped the metro. And the government was eager, please do a legal union. Because we need to speak with you. So, I think there is a lot of potential with, of course, we are using these social networks as the most addictive, alienated thing, but it can also become the other thing. It can become an incredible tool for organization. So I think this is about political organization, it's not about the tool or the place. Going to the public sector, well, the public sector has become a key factor on organizing the working classes for so many reasons. One of the reasons, I think, is that I do not agree that we are in a post-Fordist society. I, in fact, agree that we are even in a more Fordist society when we look to the spread of the fabric system to public sector. What we see what we see in so many strikes in the last 40 years in the public sector is there this disruptive potential, because nowadays, if you had a strike on education 60 years ago, you had a lots of domestic work, many women didn't work yet, etc. Nowadays, if you have a strike on a school, it's a calamity, because there is no place to leave the children. So there is a kind of this entanglement within the capitalist society, make it much potential. We have studied a strike in the Observatory of the Nurses, such a smart strike. They just stopped the surgery block, where the money was going to, was the surgery block. And all the other nurses gave a little bit of money to the surgery block. And the government, and I will answer to that question immediately, the government has forbidden the strike. They made civil requisition to the strike. And I shall say that the experience in Portugal of the government of the Socialist Party with the left bloc and the Communist Party has led to the forbidden of the nurses' strike by civil requisition, to the military requisition of truck drivers. When the truck drivers stopped the country, the Socialist Party, supported by the left bloc and the Communist Party, decided to substitute the truck drivers by military personnel and say that all the truck drivers were extreme right, Chilean, like Chile Pinochet. First of all, Chile Pinochet has a lot of debate, but I was in the plenariums of the truck drivers plenariums, and they were nothing to do with extreme right. They were desperate for struggling for, they were working in average 15 hours a day, earning 700 euros. They were fighting for an increase which would be 100 euros in total. There is a legal thing I cannot explain. The Dock Workers Union and other left unions at the time went there, which was essential for these workers didn't go immediately to the extreme right, because the extreme right tried to go there as well. Because who was doing the military requisition to them? It was not the right, it was the left government. They were, this was a new union that was a totally spontaneous break of the communist union because they were supporting the left government, and any of them had any political or union experience. So, and there was another civil requisition during the left government. I believe that the left in Portugal is disappearing because they have supported the Socialist Party government. And the extreme right have increased from 1 deputy to 50 deputies after the Socialist Party government. And I think this is not a coincidence. There was a disaster policy against the workers run by the Socialist Party, which has opened an enormous place to the extreme right. Of course, then you can tell me, oh, but the radical left also doesn't have space. This is true. But this doesn't legitimize the support to a neoliberal government that appears as a socialist government. So there's always this thing. I think I didn't have the choice to say that we had a great experience using Workers' Enquirer. And Workers' Enquirer was not invented by us in our inquirers in the academy. Was invented by Marx and was used by the Catholic Church to build counter-revolutions. Was used by the left opposition. And I think Workers' Enquirer is an incredible tool we have, which is listening the workers. This is so important. Our experience in listening the rank and file workers is absolutely amazing. And I think this is one of the tools we have that we don't use enough. Which can increase the dialogue between theory and organization. And the question of anti-fascism, I don't have answers to all of it. First of all, I'm not sure if we are dealing with fascist governments. There are lots of debate on this, and I still have to think more on this. We are dealing with dangerous governments. We are dealing with an incredible struggle among fractions of the bourgeoisie. This is clear. Look at Trump. It's a war between them, clearly. But this doesn't matter. This doesn't mean because they are not fascist. This is a political discussion. Doesn't mean that they are not incredibly dangerous for the working classes. Bonapartism is very dangerous for the working class. Others, so it doesn't. We don't need to call them because fascism should be a kind of a civil war against proletarian threat of revolution. Are we dealing with this? I'm not sure. Or it's a new type of fascism. Well, in any case, what can we do about this? Well, I think the worst thing is to call them fascist and think that the working class will support this because of this. It has been tried in France and in other countries, and now they have half of the votes. So just tell to the workers, look, you are voting in a fascist will not solve the situation, that we know. So what can we do? Well, I think we have to go back to this idea of trying to organize the working classes and at least don't defend these awful policies towards the working class, anti-strike policies. And for example, I can give another example. When there was this strike of the agriculture workers in Europe against the Mercosur deal in Europe, it was incredible. All the European Union has made laws against cutting roads, very anti-strike laws that if you blockade a road, this is highly, criminal, there's really persecution. And suddenly, in one day in Europe, all the major cities were blockaded by trucks of the agriculture. And in the majority of these agricultures were small agricultures that are totally trying to survive in the last years. France has one of the highest suicide rate among small agricultures in the last years. How has the left reacted to this, saying they were controlled by the extreme right? And Marine Le Pen was there. How come the left was not there saying, look, you are in trouble, we support you by expropriation bank sector. We are not against small agriculture. This is not our enemy. And I think there has been a huge mistake with these small entrepreneurs or petit bourgeois, which in fact I cannot see neither in Marx, in Engels, in Trotsky transition program, anything saying that we are in favor of expropriating small companies. What is there is that we are in favor of expropriating big companies in order to support the small companies. even with credit, that is in the transition program. So for me, it's very strange when I see small companies in dangers, and immediately the left saying you are all controlled by fascists. First of all, this is not a policy, any kind of politics to call fascist to a worker. It's just a nervous breakdown. It's not, it's not really politics. Secondly, it's wrong politics because we are breaking. The question is, I'm not saying that this is a Bible, but I believe that is very rational, this discussion Trotsky has on Germany. And he says, look, the question is not the middle classes are reactionary. They are reactionary if the working class doesn't offer a radical solution. Their Jacobinism becomes the highly reactionary fascism. If it's not objectivist theory, oh, look, you are a petty peasant, you are a small entrepreneur, you are a fascist. This is, sorry, I never saw this anywhere. What is there is that we have to have enough radical, real politics that bring these sectors to us, I think. As for dual power, my experience, not my experience, this is not a good answer. My studies on dual powers, mainly on the Carnation Revolution, is that I cannot see how we solve any problems in society without dual power. In fact, it's the opposite. It's not about representative democracy. For example, what we saw in the Carnation Revolution was that Portugal has the highest rate of infant and child mortality in all Europe. No hospitals. And suddenly, the doctors, the physicians and the nurses, mainly the physicians, occupied the hospitals, and they were there 24 hours a day, half working, half managing the hospital. And in 4 months, all the private hospitals of the church were nationalized, all the emergency sector was open to the public for free, in 4 months. I don't think this could be done by the best manager of the world or the best government. You need to have the commitment of the people. People need to believe in what they are doing, think what they are doing, and doing what they are think in order to solve the problems. This is not something that can come from above. That's why workers' democracy is so important for socialists. It's not because just we like democracy. We like democracy, of course, but it's more than that. Just democracy can solve the problems because just democracy is connect us ontologically to labor process. You can say in any company, in any factory, in any place, in any public services, oh, you are going to do this, this, and this. If you don't believe in what you are doing, you are not going to do it. Now, that's why they are in panic. Because they have discovered that with new management in public sector, nothing works. Because people are not committed. You know, the physicians, they do the protocol, by the way, which is the pharmaceutic protocol, but they do the protocol in order to avoid juridical problems. But then they don't cure the people. Because they are not committed with that. And what we saw in the Portuguese Revolution were that the physicians were there on Saturday, Sunday night without being paid because they feel this was my hospital. They are my patients. I am involved on the decisions. And if we break that's why dual power is so important. So we could think about something that could put together some kind of dual power with representative democracy. And we are highly complex societies. I'm not totally against some kind of representative democracy, but this cannot be the base of the decisions of a society. About immigration, I don't think it's just a problem within the European Union. We saw now the Nepalese workers being for the first time in a demonstration in Lisbon. It was so beautiful to see this. And these workers don't even speak Portuguese. They are totally, there is an organization of these workers, Solidariedade Imigrante, connected with the left bloc. One of the few things they do well is still doing some kind of real work with this migrant. And this has a result. They were in the streets. It's an organization that also helps the workers with legalize, etc. But they mix legalization and taking care in political demands. So it was so beautiful to see them in the streets. And they were singing 25th of April forever, but they speak very bad Portuguese. It was incredible. I even cried when I saw that, because they were singing the songs of the revolution, and they are Nepalese and Indian workers and Bangladesh workers that cannot speak Portuguese. It was such a beautiful situation to see this. But this is about organization. I'm glad that the left bloc is doing this job with them. And about prefiguration. Prefiguration it has to do with Workers' Inquiry also. We have this wonderful experience on Workers' Inquiry because we do first the metric inquiry. 200 questions, all workers answer, we do statistics, etc. But, and then workers are very in love with these statistics. Oh, 80% of us are in burnout, 30% of us have some musculoskeletal problems, and it's like, oh, the scientists are saying what we feel. We are exhausted, we are in pain. But then we go there and say, look, we want to do psychodynamics of labor. Psychodynamics of labor is a collective discussion. We do small groups of workers, and we start debating for many hours, usually 4 or 5 hours. We start listening to the workers, but among them, they start working. And then we discover that half of what is in the inquiry is totally wrong. The statistics don't show what people feel and what really happens. Because when we start talking with workers, we discover the meaning of work, but also huge amount of lies that go out of the alienation process. But in this process, we also discover solutions. Another types it's amazing. For example, in the railway workers, at the beginning was just this common thing, you know, problems with working time hours, threats, etc., disciplinary process, evaluation, quality, all this. And suddenly we were, after the psychodynamics of labor, we were listening from them incredible proposals on organization of railway in a national level. And I tell you, what they propose is much more rational than what the government proposed, because they are attached to the meaning of work. The same if you go to a physician. After some hours, he forgets the protocol and he starts saying how the protocol doesn't allow him to treat well his patient. But for this, we need to create conversation and trust among workers, because otherwise they can have real problems if they don't follow the protocol. So we need to find places where workers can talk with each other without fear. That's why I really am against this denounce system or persecuting everyone, etc. Like, also this has an idea that we are all very pure persons, you know, we are all perfect. If you are not perfect, you are not part of our group. This is a sect idea of working class. Working class is full of, we are working class, we are full of contradictions. We have, all of us, we commit mistakes, we have problems, we are not perfect. So I think we have to, you know, try to have, I think the prefiguration also comes from a dialogue between theory and workplace. I have wonderful ideas about education, but I don't have wonderful ideas about aviation. I need to listen to you and your colleagues. And we have done a work to the maintenance, engineer maintenance workers. And in TAP, And we have discovered, and we have done in cabin crew also, and we have done huge amount of lies they do to make the aeroplane work. It's fabulous, fabulous. It's the real of work. They need to lie in order we are safe. Otherwise, we wouldn't be safe. So it's really amazing when we have the disposal to listen to the workers. But I have to say that the Pravda was organized like that. The Bolshevik Party was organized like that. There was a real connection between the party organizers and the factories were party organizers, and the intellectuals were involved. So there was a real connection, and I think we have to rebuild this connection. One instrument is the Workers' Enquirer. This is not an academic instrument. This is an incredible instrument of putting together the academics and the workers, in my opinion.
Let's take some more questions. Hearing her comments has reminded me of a line from Lenin, 10 seconds. Durable and significant reforms are not because of trade union struggle. Durable and significant reforms are a byproduct of revolutionary struggle, revolutionary upsurge. It's a fundamental mistake to believe that we got a welfare state, we got a little rise in wage because we fought for it. No. The welfare state is a product of 1917 as much as the product of the struggle of men and women in North America and Western Europe. But thank you for reminding us about that. All right, yes, Vivian, please.
Thank you. Thank you. I also want to go back to one question from Greg that I didn't answer, which is the climate, the ecological question. I prefer, or let's say, our
Which you write on as well,
yes.
direct some other big
Yes.
project.
I think, for example, we should address this question in a way that we don't need to cope with all these Agenda 2030 or United Nations intergovernmental panel. I to be honest, I find absolutely nonsense that scientists vote if there is climate change or not by 90-70%. This is not our debate. Our debate is what can, it's not a, like, oh, you are a negationist, I think the debate should be on what kind of measures can we have in order to live decently in a world that is aggressive to us. What we eat, how we live, how we are. And the question should be, cannot be saying to the workers that if they are not in favor of building electric cars, they are negationists. I don't think this is a policy as well. I think we should ask them, look, I do this on Volkswagen all the time. I said, I'm in favor that all of you have work and work much less, but why you are not building trains and bicycles? And you are building electric cars subsidized by the taxis that take your doctor and your school teacher. So I think it's about also, we cannot, because it seems that sometimes this question on climate, I also think this is something that has helped to fuel extreme right. I'll be honest. I think the left makes so much mistakes that is incredible just half of the country voting extreme right. Because when we look to the mistakes of the left, it could be even worse. And in France, the polls are very interesting on this. They show that the majority of the left went to abstention, not to extreme right vote, concerning polls in votes. This is very interesting. So I think we should give, we could ask if there is not other solutions. And also, for example, concerning workers. We have thousands of workers working in communication, and now they are threatened by artificial intelligence. Well, first of all, they were already doing the same kind of bad stuff as artificial intelligence does. If you read a journal 10 years ago, or if you look to the publicity, it's all the same. It's easy to be substituted by artificial intelligence because that's already very bad and with no creativity. It's already an incredible rubbish that was produced by lack of meaning of work in these workers. If you are a teacher that spends 1 hour reading the PowerPoint, well, you can be easily substituted by artificial intelligence because you are a terrible, boring teacher that you are reading the PowerPoint, and I'm exactly reading the same as you. I'm not going to this class. So I can be online pretending I'm there, and I'm not, to get a certificate that certificates me to work in a thing that I don't know what I'm going to do. So it's what we could do about this is ask a little bit like Raymond Williams, why we are working on communication and marketing. Do we need this? Why don't we put all this money in education? Why these people that are drawing things to sell, I don't know, hamburgers or shoes, are not teaching people to create, to draw, to not just consume art, but produce art? Why are there's a lots of things we can ask. Why we are not saying to the people we're going to be unemployed, but why you could not do other things much more interesting instead of doing this? And I think the question of putting together different sectors of the working class, it's very important. But for example, in the Portuguese Revolution, we saw how much the engineers were involved in occupied factories, over 1,000 occupied factories. How much students were involved in education of the peasants that had no literacy. How much periphery and the center became together. So it was a kind of all sectors. Paul Sweezy used to say that the Portuguese Revolution is the first 21st century revolution. And I think this is really very serious, because what we saw was not just the industrial sector, was service sector, was cultural sector. I mean, the Conservatory of Music was occupied, not just the industry factor. It was a kind of it really opens the door to what has happened. And I think one thing has happened in the Portuguese Revolution was that solutions were much more easy because of that. Because workers occupied the factories and they didn't know what to do with that. But the mathematicians, engineers, all engaged in politics were there to help to manage the company as well. So there was a kind of a putting together different sectors of the working class. This was very beautiful. I think the Beto's question is very important, but I think all this goes to the state question. If we are going to demand within the state or to demand against the state. And I think most of the demands nowadays are within the state, and they look very progressive. It's like the state should do, the state should regulate, the state should provide. It's never about how we organize ourselves against the state. And I think there was lost this idea of who is the state. And this is clear for me concerning, for example, now people are very in panic with Trump because he is persecuting and forbidding many things at the university. But 10 years ago, there were lots of people in the left defending that we should forbidden things at the university. And who is forbidden this? The state. 10 years ago, the state was saying, you cannot be a racist, otherwise you are expelled from the university. And now Trump says, if you are pro-Palestine, you are expelled from the university. But the core is the state and the law. Because as militants, we fight racism. We don't ask the state to make people illegal. To make illegal, it apparently is very progressive, but it makes us vulnerable. Because now they can say, oh, you are defending repression measures, you are defending more power to, who is going to make something forbidden? It's the state, it's not us. I mean, I was in demonstrations where we were even violent against the fascists. I defend that you can have a anti-fascist demonstration at the university and clashes and whatever it is. But I don't defend that we make a law, because this is giving power to the state. This is, and I think this, it's the same with most of things that have appeared in the last decades, which is we keep defending more laws, more regulation, more involvement of the state in a threat. It's a trap. It's a trap to our demands. But there are counterexamples very interesting. For example, after 2008, almost all European unions have increased the so-called minimum services. It's called like here, this. Yes, you make strike, but then you have minimum services. And they have accepted this. Of course, you have to have minimum services in hospitals. You cannot go on strike and leave the emergency or firemen. But other service, they don't have minimum services. If an aeroplane stops, except if it is for a medicine urgent, the aeroplane stops. Because a strike is to stop. We are not providing services, we are blockading services. So a strike needs to stop the production. But then they accepted all these minimum services. Some unions start to disobey to the minimum services because they realize, look, we cannot make the strike if you oblige the minimum services. The minimum service blockades the strike. So there are examples where we can see already that the unions are saying, look, the legal framework doesn't allow us to make the strike.
We use essential services.
Essential service, sorry, I'm making a waffle translation. Essential services. Yeah, but the question is, what is essential service? It's if you are in danger, it is an essential service. If you are not, I'm reading now I never read it. I read this week for the first time, The Strike of Jack London. This it was to be called Memory to Eugene Debs. It's a little tale on how a general strike stops the country and how they cannot solve any problem without the work. But this is the role of work. The strike is to show the role of work, is not to negotiate, okay, we transport half of the people. No, a strike is to show, look, we are the essential, not essential service, we are essential to society. That's why we are not going to do essential service, so you can realize who has the power. And the last thing concerning, well, I think housing will become a key sector of struggles in all world, because what we saw after 2008 is that the centers of the cities became a place where middle classes and rich funds put their money because they are afraid to put their money in the bank. So nowadays the minimum wage in Portugal is 700 euros, and a house in Lisbon with 2 rooms costed 700,000 euros. Shanty towns, after 50 years of the revolution, returned to Lisbon now. We have shanty towns growing in Lisbon for the first time in 50 years. And the shanty towns, there were 100,000 people living in shanty towns in Lisbon in 1974. And there was this movement called Houses Not Barracas. Barracas is... Shacks? Houses, not shacks. And what the workers have done was to occupy empty houses, and the massive occupation of empty, it was not massive occupation, they start occupying, and all the owners were such in panic that they put the houses in the market and the prices dramatically fell down. So people had a house to live, a very small rent to pay, And this was generalized in the Portuguese Revolution. Was really, they say, oh, this crazy work, the right wing said, the crazy workers, they occupy all our property. It's not true. They in fact occupy some hundreds of houses, but all the other ones were in panic and put houses in the market. So the idea that if you have a house for speculation, it will be occupied was the main, and I think that there is also a problem on the left with this, because what we see is that they are defending, for example, a maximum amount that you can ask for a rent. It's okay, I'm not against this. But the main problem is the bank sector. Most of these houses are in funds, or they are trying to save the money that was put in the banks in 2008. It's a finance system, the housing. It's the majority of them is not. It's not the second house that a middle class someone buys. No, it's really a speculation system. So I think they should defend openly. Look, if it is for speculation, it should be occupied. That should be an answer, because people are not rubbish. They cannot be thrown to outside without a home.
Thank you. Now, I had promised to the two speakers that I would set aside 10 minutes, 5 minutes each, for any concluding comments they might want to make. I'm sure there are more questions and comments, but you can speak to them just after 5 p.m. It's time now, it's almost 5 p.m. She has been talking and talking and talking for 2-3 days.
Don't make it sound like a bad thing.
It's quite a bit of your time.
I will shut up now, I promise. Greg will finish.
The TV interview, another interview today, etc., etc. So, yeah, Greg, if you would like to just say a few words, a few lines, and then
Yeah, it was a wonderful presentation, and there's such a convergence of out of the frustrations, this groping towards something new in the organizational exploration and program along the lines that you're speaking to. It was so many of the things either felt directly, theorized directly, or kind of people are living it implicitly and trying to scramble them to find an exit from it. You know, as much as you said, it is a moment of we need maximum militancy with complete abandonment in the sense of creativity, that kind of find an exit out of this impasse. The impasse is in political alternatives is so common. And you know, the whole world to some extent is feeling it, and it is at a moment in time where the political right is mobilizing, and that kind of combination of militancy and creativity that you were exploring in the talk and your research seems to me so fundamental. It's you know, kind of grasping among the working class movement and socialists that, you know, we can change the world. And that seems to me the most fundamental message. Yes. you got across. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Greg. Well, thank you very much. I don't know, I would have to think about it. I really don't know. It's the first time I'm thinking on this. But just to say that most of the problems weren't solved. We produce everyday things that we don't need, and we don't produce everything that we need every day. So what capitalism was solved it was towards profit, the kind of calculation and plan that was done. And it's not even solved for capitalism, because the latest idea of capitalists, which is not a new idea, we all knew it, is war economy. Now I don't have to say to the workers in Volkswagen, why you are not producing trains so we can live better and have a better planet. And they say, no, we're going to produce tanks, which is, I mean, it's real. In Osnabrück in Germany, Volkswagen is producing tanks, which of course for Marxists was absolutely forcing. In 2008, all of us wrote, look, there is no way this money is going to be returned except in a destruction process. No way. And the so-called artificial intelligence is being used for this. It's being used in Gaza. It's not being used to save people in Myanmar under the earthquake. It's being used to target it, thousands of children and women in Gaza. So I think capitalism is not solving any problem. That technology that was developed could make it easier to build a socialist society, yes, but again, who is in charge of this technology today? I think it's a key question. I also want to thank you for bringing me here. Luis is highly responsible for me to be here because he insisted a lot last year, this year, and I said, oh, these people are very kind. I have to go, and now I'm extremely happy that I really was here with you, all of you. Was a great decision to come. And to Raju, Professor Raju, please, because you have to give me 1 minute to thank you for the incredible welcome, for how much I can learn with you, and so it's really nice, and thank you all.
Thank you. You'll get his emails at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
It's okay in Portugal.
Thank you,
because
Greg,
you'll get them in the morning.
I'm sorry, we're really out of time, and if you have any questions, comments, you can always come and speak to Raquel now and by email, etc. So thank you all for coming. Thank you.